Hello?
Hello, can you hear me?
Now I can. It was.
Lee, that was weird.
Yeah,
That
yeah,
was.
that was. I was like, oh, well, I guess cut scene number one.
That's gonna go into the blooper reel. Hello, and welcome to Skylines Talk, the new chat show for City Skylines, where we'll go behind the Sims and meet some of the brightest, most creative minds in the City Skylines community. Find out what makes them tick, and maybe even learn a tip or two. Who am I? I'm Bon Bon B, and you are very, very welcome.
Come here now, girl.
Okay, welcome to part one of Behind the Sims. How are you doing today?
Hey, Bon B, I'm doing great. I'm honored to be here and excited by your new show.
How would you like me to refer to you? Do you want to go by the name Mr. Miyagi, which I'm pretty sure is not your real name, or do you have a real given name that perhaps your parents gave to you a few years ago?
Mr. Miyagi is just fine, even though there's no mystique about it. Now, Bloody Penguin, however, nobody knows his or her identity. So, yeah, I think they're actually a real modding superhero, so...
Well, Bloody Penguin I will track down and interview sometime soon. So, Mr. Miyagi, obviously I know where the name Mr. Miyagi comes from, but what's the story behind it and how come you came to choose that one?
Well, originally I planned to make trees for the game, and oh boy, have you ever tried to do 3D modeling?
Nope.
Don't try. So I'm not very imaginative with names, so I picked a nickname I had for years. When I moved into New York in my apartment, I had a patio with bamboo fence, bonsai, fountain, yada yada. And a neighbor pops his head over the fence and he says, "Hey, look at this. We got a freaking Mr. Miyagi over here." It lasted for years. So every time I'd come home and say, "Hey, Mr. Miyagi, karate chop anyone lately?" They would ask me to fix their mom's plants that they had, forgot to water while she was on vacation. So yeah.
Tell me a little bit about yourself. Obviously, you say you're from New York. Give us a little bit of personal background. Don't have to go
Sure.
too deep.
I'm originally from Metro New York, as you can tell from the accent. I was going to be a Spanish teacher of yo, tú. That was too much, no way. So I ended up in university administration. I live now in Germany, living the married life. The only downside is that Spanish really doesn't help at all here.
Not that many Spanish Germans.
No.
So then, how did you end up getting into City Skylines then?
I always loved the Sim City of long ago, long before EA. And I like a little Europa Universalis and Victoria too. But honestly, city builders were always my thing. So I tried out some of those Facebook city, but they were so awful, it put me off from gaming at all. So for years I wasn't here.
You don't see much modding for Facebook apps, do you?
No. And then you have to beg everybody for imaginary pieces that don't
You're not
exist.
far wrong there at all. Right, so you're known for your realistic map builds. I know that you've done some 3D builds before as well. But these map builds, I've had a look down your list and it's just an eclectic mix. We've got Polynesia, Germany, Spain, England, Macau, Slovenia, Norway, Wales, New Orleans, New Caledonia, Australia, the Gulf Coast. I mean, just the list is as wide as it can be. Where do you get your inspiration from?
Well, when I was a little kid, I used to draw maps with topographic layers and like real places or imagined places. But I think where that comes from is that I used to draw landscapes and often craggy coastlines or mountains. Basically what you see in the maps. So it's the kind of landscape where you'd be in a tour bus and you leave a nose print on the window as you pass by. I have so many different places, but they're usually in a really interesting landscape.
So when you go about starting one of these maps, what's the process? Where do you start? What's the first thing that you would do?
Yeah, first I'll preface that by saying what got me into making maps for cities in the first place. Once we pick a map, there is no exchange, there is no way to change it, and we all invest a huge amount of time in our cities. Come across a problem long on down the line after we've invested all our blood, sweat, and tears. which only a city builder would understand. Virtual blood, sweat, and tears. If the map has serious problems and you only run into it later in the game, that can really be frustrating. And there's nothing you can do except pile on a bunch of mods. And ain't nobody got time for that. So in the process, I start first with the inspiration. So usually it's a place I've drawn or visited, as I mentioned. But also if I get a request, what I'll do is I'll go down to Google Maps and go into Street View and take a look at what it looks like afar and what the streets look like and the terrain. And so from there, we'll know about Terrain Party. And that's where you can start off with a real life location. So of course, if it's Imagine, you just go with your imagination. But a lot of people like to do the real life maps. So you get a height map from Terrain Party, and you'll notice when you put it into the game, it looks usually pretty awful. So what I do is I learned actually from others. Someone early on, they told me about Wilbur, which is a free program, and it takes a height map image and it simulates real-world geological forces like erosion and millions of years of erosion. So you can take your rough Terrain Party height map into Wilbur and then make it look really good. But that's also only the start, because after that, maybe 5 minutes of Wilbur, then it's weeks of handwork. You also have to test the map out, ideally, with the city before I publish it. So that way I can make sure that it actually functions and I haven't messed something up on the way.
That sounds really good. So this Wilbur, is that an online app, or is that something you purchase, or?
No, it's free. It's freeware at this point. I think I'm amazed it still works, actually. But I have a link to it in my guide and some PDF guides. I'm not exactly sure where they use it. At some university level they did, because 3/4 of the stuff I have no idea what it means. But once I got it, I played with it for an entire day nonstop.
We're talking about, obviously, as you say, weeks and weeks working on this rough map to give it some finesse. What tips and tricks would you give, say, me? What are the main things I should be looking to do?
Well, I think, first of all, the way that I learned was that there's a great community with this game, unlike any other. So there's a solid core of people who are really helpful. So that was how I learned everything. So the first thing you can do is, if you like, you can subscribe to a map you like the looks of, take a look through the map and functionality, and go ahead and ask the creator if you say you're interested in making a map and you will have questions about this or that. And I think, unlike any other game in this community, who are more than willing to actually help you out. I mean, that's how I learned about Wilbur and 3/4 of the other stuff.
So what I'll do, anybody asks me any questions, I'll pass every one of those 1,000 people on to you now.
No!
Right, are there any maps or ideas that you're sitting on at the moment that you'd like to share with us, or is this a big secret?
Actually, I hardly plan anything. I just kind of go with the flow, but I'm trying to make a YouTube series where I take a map step by step. I was trying to make a guide, and I've only gotten part of the way through it, since it's really hard to boil down in concise format. But I found that it's extremely difficult, so maybe I should pay you to do that for me, Bon Bon.
Yeah, you could pay me and I'll gladly do it. Expensive, by the way. You've just been employed as lead developer on... No, that's not going to go out that way. Right, you've got a new job. You've just been employed as the lead developer on City Skylines 2. What things would you like to concentrate on, and is there anything you'd really like to add to this game?
I think it's great. The game is the way it is it's great for designing and looking at things and creating. But I think it would be great to add some elements that make that add beef to the city simulation part of it. Stories or challenges that have a substantive effect on your city's progress, economic factors that really do more of an effect on your city's development. And maybe something better than just a little chirper to avoid. maybe some little newspaper reels or something creative. We do have that in Scenario Editor, but I think it's got its own Achilles heels, and making a scenario is a huge amount of work. So I think if they build it into the game, that would be good. Oh, and one last thing, the traffic AI.
How did I know you were going to say that?
I figured out how to mitigate a lot of the traffic, and I've built in some really crazy things into some of my maps to make sure that players don't have an awful experience with traffic flow, but it would be great if we didn't have to do that in the first place.
This is true. So finally, who in the City Skylines community, if you could have anybody on show number 2, you could book them in today, who would you like to see interviewed in the coming shows? And have you got any specific questions you'd like me to ask them?
Well, there's so many great creators. There's no way for me to really give you even a short list. You know, there's so many of us, and we all talk amongst each other. So, but I think if you can nail down Bloody Penguin and get his superhero or her superhero identity down, that would be cool for the rest of us.
Well, that's amazing. Absolutely. Well, I will do my best. Well, thanks very much for your time, for coming along and joining me in today's first ever episode. Wish you the very best of luck, and have a wonderful life.
Thanks so much for having me, and I look forward to your next What Map. I watch every single one of those. Map creators can get a lot of information from your What's Map. For me, that's a gold mine. So I can see what I'm doing wrong and maybe could fix better. So that's a good suggestion.